The first day we walked. The second day we walked. By the third day, some men couldn't walk anymore, and nobody stopped for the ones who couldn't. From the testimony of an American soldier who survived the Bataan Death March, April 1942, the Philippines. 100 kilometers, tropical heat, and at every step a decision about whether to keep living. April 1942, the Bataan Peninsula, the Philippines. The fighting was over. At least on this front it was over. American and Filipino forces had held out for months, January through April. No supplies, no reinforcement, no food, no medicine, but they had held. On April 9th, they surrendered. 76,000 men, the largest military surrender in American history up to that point. And now they were going to walk. Private Thomas Mallory served with the 31st Infantry Regiment. He was from Illinois, 22 years old. When he had arrived in the Philippines, he hadn't imagined things would deteriorate this fast. Nobody had. After the surrender, the Japanese guards assembled everyone. Orders were given. They would march north, to San Fernando. From there a train, from there a camp. How many kilometers? Nobody said. Mallory turned to Rodriguez beside him. "How long do you think it'll take?" he asked. Rodriguez shrugged. "No idea, but ask for water." Mallory turned to a guard, gestured for water. The guard looked at him, gestured to keep moving. The march began.
The Bataan Death March took place between April 9th and 17th, 1942. Approximately 76,000 American and Filipino soldiers were marched from the Bataan Peninsula to Camp O'Donnell in Tarlac Province. The total distance varied between roughly 97 and 105 kilometers, depending on the route taken. The treatment of prisoners by Japanese guards during the march was a clear violation of the Geneva Convention. Estimates suggest that between 5,000 and 18,000 prisoners died during the march itself and in the first weeks after reaching the camp. These figures remain a subject of historical debate.
Day 1. The heat came early. A Philippine April was merciless. The sun was already burning by 9 in the morning, and the men walked, thousands of them, a column of human beings stretching the length of the road. Mallory looked ahead. He couldn't see the end of the column. He looked back. He couldn't see where it began. There was no water. Along the road, they passed through small villages from time to time. Villagers sometimes tried to hold out water. Some guards allowed it, some didn't. It was like a lottery. It depended on which guard you happened to be next to at each village. At the second village, Mallory tried his luck. A woman held out her hand, a small water container. Mallory reached for it. The guard struck him with the butt of his rifle. Mallory went down. The container tipped. The water ran into the dirt. He got up, kept walking. Rodriguez had seen it, but said nothing. There was nothing to say. In the afternoon, the first man went down. He was left at the side of the road. Mallory didn't know what happened to him. He didn't want to know. He just walked. His feet were hurting. His head was swimming. He hadn't had water in hours. But he walked, because he understood now what stopping meant.
Prisoners on the Bataan Death March were marched an average of 30 to 40 kilometers per day. Tropical heat, dehydration, hunger, and exhaustion were the primary threats. Many of the men had already been weakened by malaria and dysentery before the march began. The behavior of Japanese guards varied considerably from individual to individual. Some acted with a degree of decency, while others applied systematic violence. In the later stages of the march, men who fell or slowed down frequently did not survive.
Day 3. Mallory was still on his feet, just on his feet. That was its own achievement by now. Rodriguez was still beside him. They held each other up from time to time. No need for words, just moving forward shoulder to shoulder. That morning, the man ahead of them went down. He was young, maybe 2 or 3 years younger than Mallory. He hit the ground hard, tried to get up. His legs wouldn't hold him. The guard shouted, "Get up!" The man couldn't. Mallory stopped. Rodriguez stopped. A few men around them stopped. The guard shouted again. Mallory bent down, got under the man's arm, tried to lift him. Rodriguez took the other arm. The man got up, slowly, with difficulty, but he got up. The guard looked at them, waited a moment, then gestured for them to move. They moved. Mallory carried that man for 2 hours. His own legs were hurting, his own head was spinning, but he didn't let go. 2 hours later, the man slowly began walking on his own. Mallory released his arm. The man turned, looked at him, said nothing. Mallory said nothing either. They just walked. The only thought going through Mallory's mind in that moment was this: if I go down, will anyone pick me up? He didn't know the answer, but he had done for that man what he had hoped someone might do for him. That was enough.
Solidarity among prisoners during the Bataan March was one of the most critical factors in survival. The stronger supported the weaker. This mattered both physically and psychologically, but this solidarity had limits. Some guards tolerated mutual assistance among prisoners. Others punished any slowing down severely. This inconsistency kept prisoners in a state of constant uncertainty. The testimonies of survivors like Mallory show just how decisive that solidarity could be.
Day 5. Mallory had stopped counting. Kilometers, hours, days. Counting felt pointless. Just one more step, then one more step after that. Rodriguez's feet had started bleeding. His boots had fallen apart. He was walking barefoot. The stones on the road were tearing at him. Mallory tore a piece from his own boot, wrapped it around Rodriguez's foot. Rodriguez objected. "You need that. Walk," Mallory said. In the afternoon, a rest stop was called. Short, very short. They sat at the side of the road. Water was distributed. Not much, barely anything, but it was water. Mallory swallowed it. He wanted to hold it in his mouth, make it last, but he swallowed. The rest ended. Time to get up. The man beside him didn't get up. He stayed where he was sitting. His eyes were open, but there was nothing in them. Mallory didn't know him, didn't know his name, but they had been walking side by side for hours. He bent down, touched his shoulder. The man didn't respond. Mallory stood up, walked. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he wouldn't be able to keep going, and if he stopped, he would stay there too. Rodriguez was beside him. They walked together. No water, no food, exhausted, but they walked.
The 5th and 6th days of the Bataan March were recorded as the period of heaviest losses. By this point, dehydration and exhaustion had reached critical levels. Cases of heat stroke had increased significantly. For prisoners already showing symptoms of malaria and dysentery, the march had become nearly impossible. Historians emphasize that a large proportion of the deaths in this period were preventable. Basic medical intervention and adequate water supply could have saved many of the men who died on those days.
Day 7. San Fernando. When the train station came into view, Mallory slowed his step. So there was a train. So the walking was ending. But the carriages were small, far too small, and there were far too many prisoners. They were packed in, no room to breathe, hot, suffocating. It had been hot outside, but inside the carriage it was worse. Mallory looked at Rodriguez. Rodriguez's face had gone gray, but he was still standing. The train moved to Capas, then a short march to the camp, Camp O'Donnell. When Mallory walked through the gate, he looked around. There were tents, men lying on the ground. Some of them weren't moving. This was the camp. This was salvation. Mallory sat down on the ground, sat for a long time. He didn't want to get up. Rodriguez dropped down beside him. The two of them sat in silence. Then Rodriguez asked quietly, "How many days was it?" Mallory thought about it. "I don't know," he said. "I stopped counting." Rodriguez nodded. They sat in silence for a long time after that. Mallory thought about crying in that moment, but he couldn't. No tears came. Maybe there was no water left in his body. Maybe it was something else. He just sat and felt that he was alive. For now, that was enough.
Arrival at Camp O'Donnell was not salvation for the prisoners. It was the beginning of a new process of dying. The camp was far beyond capacity. There was no clean water, no medical supplies. Hundreds of prisoners died every day in the first weeks. Estimates suggest that between 1,500 and 2,500 American soldiers died in the camp's first 2 months alone. Filipino prisoner losses were considerably higher. For survivors like Mallory, the end of the march was simply the start of the next fight to stay alive.
Mallory came out of the camp at the end of the war, 1945. 3 years later, he went back to Illinois, back to his family. He got on with his life, married, worked, had children. From the outside, it looked like a normal life, but some things had changed. Before every meal, he always paused for a moment. His family had noticed, but never asked. Once his eldest son asked. Mallory thought about it. On the march, sometimes there was no food for days. Now when there's food in front of me, I just stop for a moment to remember. His son didn't fully understand. Mallory didn't explain further. Years later, he testified before Congress about Bataan, about the march, about the camp. He spoke for hours, in detail, in a quiet voice, without crying once. On his way out, a journalist asked, "How do you remember so much detail after all this time?" Mallory stopped. "I tried to forget. It didn't work, so I chose to remember instead. Because if I don't remember, the ones who didn't come back get forgotten too."
The Bataan Death March became a significant part of international war crimes proceedings. After 1945, Japanese commanders responsible for organizing the march were tried in post-war tribunals. General Masaharu Homa was executed in 1946, but the impact of Bataan on the American public went beyond the legal proceedings. The testimonies of survivors served for decades as a critical reference point in debates about the standards of treatment owed to prisoners of war.
Mallory died in 1997 in Illinois, at home. He talked about Bataan for the rest of his life. That set him apart from many of the other survivors. Most of them chose silence. Mallory chose to speak. He went to schools. He went to veterans organizations. He told young people what had happened, every time with the same detail, every time in the same quiet voice. Once a student asked him, "What was the hardest moment?" Mallory thought about it for a long time. "The moment I didn't look back," he said. "I looked at the man sitting at the side of the road. He didn't respond, and I walked away. I never looked back. I still haven't. But that man is still there. He's always there." The student made a note, then asked, "Did you know his name?" "No," Mallory said. "I never found out. That's the heaviest part." The Bataan Peninsula is still there today, in the Philippines. The forests have grown back. The roads have changed. Tourists visit. There's a memorial, a ceremony every April. The footprints of the men who walked that road aren't visible anymore. But Rodriguez came home. He and Mallory stayed in touch for years. Every April they wrote to each other. Short letters. They never said very much. Usually just one line. "Still walking." That was enough. Some things don't fit into words. Some things only live in a single line. The march was 100 kilometers. Every step was a decision. Every step was a choice to keep living. Mallory walked 100 kilometers, then survived 3 more years, then came home, then lived 50 more years, and every April he paused before his meal to remember.
The Bataan Death March now stands as one of the most thoroughly documented war crimes of the Second World War. The testimonies of survivors played a critical role in both legal proceedings and historical record. Men like Mallory, who chose to speak, kept this history alive. Those who stayed silent made an equally understandable choice. Both carried the weight of that march in their own way. The numbers shift depending on which historian you read, but the decisions made by the men on that road don't shift. Every step was a choice to keep living, and some of them were able to make that choice.